Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. Before we settle in, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy my videos. And if you'd like, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I always find it strangely comforting to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, grab your favorite drink, and let's ease into tonight's story together. The first 3 rules are the ones you already know. Anyone who has traveled the Great North Road for long enough learns them quickly, sometimes from experience, sometimes from watching others fail to follow them. They are spoken openly, passed between travelers at inns, shared without hesitation. It is the rules that come after that cause problems. The ones no one explains properly, the ones that are never written down, the ones you only learn because someone else did not follow them. I have walked the Great North Road more times than I can count, north and south, summer and winter, alone and in company. I am not important. I carry nothing worth stealing. I leave no mark worth remembering. And that is precisely why I am still alive. The Great North Road stretches farther than most people imagine. It threads its way through England like a long memory, connecting villages that barely know one another, passing through forests that do not care who walks beneath their branches. People think it is dangerous because of bandits, or weather, or the distance itself. It isn't. The road is dangerous because it is patient. Rule 1. Never begin the road after dawn has fully broken. You leave early, while the world is still undecided, before the sun has chosen its place in the sky, before the day settles into certainty. That is when the road belongs to you. Your thoughts are slower then. Your body moves carefully. You measure each step without realizing you are doing it. Once the sun is fully risen, you begin to rush. You walk faster than you should. You misjudge how far you can go. You tell yourself you will rest later, eat later, stop later. Later is where most problems begin. I have seen travelers start late and still smile by midday. By dusk, they are quiet. By nightfall, they are gone from the road entirely, having stepped off it somewhere they did not mean to. The road does not forgive poor timing. Rule 2. Always know where you will sleep before midday. By midday, the road begins to close its options. Inns fill. Villagers grow cautious. Doors that would have opened in the morning remain closed when the sun starts to fall. People do not trust strangers who arrive too late to be explained. If you do not know where you will rest by the time the sun reaches its highest point, you will start accepting places you should not. A barn that feels too empty. A fire already burning with no one tending it. A room offered too quickly with no questions asked. That is how people disappear without anyone noticing. The road does not announce these moments. It simply watches to see what you choose. Rule 3. Never follow a shortcut you did not walk the last time. Shortcuts are offered freely on the Great North Road, by strangers who smile too easily, by paths that look freshly walked but feel wrong beneath your boots, by signs nailed to trees that were bare the season before. The road changes slowly. It does not rearrange itself overnight. If a path appears where one did not exist before, it is not there for your convenience. It is there because someone else needed it and did not return to remove it. I walk only the roads I remember walking before, even if they take longer, even if my legs ache. Distance is safer than surprise. Those are the rules everyone knows. They are practical, sensible, easy to understand. Most people stop listening after that. They think the road is finished teaching them. It isn't. Rule 4. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn immediately. The road carries sound poorly. Footsteps echo when they should not. They fade when they should be close. Sometimes they match your pace exactly, neither gaining nor falling behind. If you turn too quickly, you reveal more than your face. You reveal awareness, curiosity, fear. Walk steadily. Let the sound settle. If the steps belong to another traveler, they will announce themselves. If they do not, slowing your pace will tell you everything you need to know. Nothing that wishes you well will mind waiting. Rule 5. Never accept food before names are exchanged. Hunger makes people careless. A crust of bread offered without a name is not kindness. It is an invitation without context. Names anchor people. They place you in the world. They remind both parties that you are meant to continue beyond this meeting. If someone offers you food before asking who you are, it is because they do not need to know. I have gone hungry longer than I should have because of this rule. I am still alive because of it. Rule 6. If a village appears where you expected open land, do not stop. Maps are old, villages are not. If you come upon a settlement where there should be fields, with no memory of the road bending toward it, continue walking. Do not seek an explanation. Do not ask how long it has been there. Some places exist only long enough to be found. They are never meant to be left. By this point, most travelers begin to laugh. They tell themselves, these are stories meant to scare the inexperienced, that long roads breed superstition, that tired minds invent patterns where none exist. I once believed that too. Then the road taught me otherwise. Rule 7. If the road becomes unnaturally straight, count your steps. The Great North Road bends. It curves with rivers, with hills, with age. If it stretches to straight for too long, something is wrong. Begin counting your steps quietly, not aloud, in your head. If you lose count, stop counting, but do not stop walking. Whatever waits for you wants you to notice it. Rule 8. When the bells ring at the wrong hour, keep walking. Bells mark time. They ring for prayer, for warning, for death. If you hear bells when the hour is wrong, too early, too late, or not at all, do not look for the source. Do not adjust your pace. Do not listen for confirmation. Time will correct itself if you let it. Stopping only tells the road you are listening. Rule 9. Never answer if someone calls your name from the trees. You will not remember telling anyone your name. That is the point. The road learns names slowly from footsteps, from breath, from hesitation. If you hear your name spoken from somewhere you cannot see, it is not a greeting, it is confirmation. Keep walking. Let the name fall behind you. By now, the rules no longer feel like advice, they feel like memory. Rule 10. If you see another version of yourself ahead on the road, slow down. It will look right. Same cloak, same gait, same pace. Do not hurry to catch it. Do not call out. Distance has a way of correcting mistakes if you give it time. If you close the gap too quickly, you may arrive where you should not. Let the road decide which of you continues. Rule 11. Never arrive at an inn you do not remember leaving. Every inn leaves an impression. A smell of smoke, a sound in the night, a floorboard that creaks. If you arrive at a place that welcomes you to easily, where the fire is already lit, where your room is prepared, leave before you sit down. Some inns are very good at keeping travelers. Rule 12. If the road ends where it should not, sit and wait for morning. The road does not end suddenly. If it does, you have reached something unfinished. Sit, rest, lower your eyes, do not explore. Morning always returns. Not everyone does. I followed these rules for years. I taught them to others. But it's easy to make mistakes. Everyone does it. I have never claimed that the road tricks you, that would give it too much intention. The road does not lie. It does not rush you. It does not force your hand. It waits, and when you make a mistake, it accepts it quietly. The night I broke the rule was not dramatic. There was no storm, no pursuit, no sudden danger that demanded a poor choice. That is what troubles me most. I was simply tired. I had been walking longer than I meant to that day. The morning had begun well early, as it should have, and the first hours passed easily beneath my feet. The road was familiar, the weather cooperative, the distance manageable. It was only in the afternoon that things began to slip. Not badly, just enough. Clouds gathered more quickly than I expected. Not threatening, just heavy. The kind that dulls the light and makes distances harder to judge. My pace slowed without my noticing. I told myself it was sensible, conserving energy. By midday, I should have known exactly where I would sleep. I did not. That alone should have made me stop. Instead, I adjusted the rule in my mind, just slightly. There was an inn ahead, or so I believed. Not one I remembered clearly, but one I was certain existed. I had passed it once before, years ago, or perhaps I had only heard it mentioned. The memory was thin, but I trusted it anyway. That was my mistake. I told myself I would reach it before nightfall. I told myself the clouds would not hold. I told myself that knowing the rule was enough, that bending it by a little did not count as breaking it. People do this all the time. They convince themselves that experience makes them exempt. As the afternoon stretched on, the road grew quieter. No carts passed. No voices carried on the air. Even the birds seemed less inclined to announce themselves. I noticed it, but did not dwell on it. Quiet, after all, is common on long roads. By the time the light began to fade, I knew I had misjudged the distance. The inn did not appear. The road continued. This was the moment I should have stopped. Not stopped walking, stopped pretending. I should have acknowledged the error, found a place to rest where I stood, accepted discomfort in exchange for safety. I had done it before. I knew how. Instead, I continued. That was the second mistake. When the light thinned enough that the road lost its edges, I began to feel the familiar unease that comes when daylight no longer belongs to you. Shapes blurred, sounds carried oddly. Every step required more attention. Still, I walked. I told myself I would only go a little farther. That phrase has undone many travelers. It was then that I heard the bells. At first, I thought I was mistaken. They were faint, distant enough to be confused with wind or the shifting of something unseen. I slowed, listening more carefully. There it was again, a bell, one slow ring. I knew immediately what was wrong with it. The hour was wrong. I stopped walking, only for a moment, only long enough to listen. That was the rule I broke. I did not seek the sound. I did not turn from the road. I simply paused, letting my attention rest on it. I told myself this was not the same thing. I told myself I was still following the spirit of the rule. I was lying. The bell rang again, closer this time, or perhaps clearer. I could not be sure. I remember feeling a small, sharp irritation, not fear, but annoyance. At myself, at the road, at the simple fact that I had let things slip this far. Stupid, I said quietly, and resumed walking. The sound did not follow. That should have comforted me. It did not. I walked for some time after that, longer than felt reasonable. The road seemed unchanged, yet everything about it felt less certain. My steps sounded louder than they should have. The ground beneath my boots felt firmer, flatter, straighter. I realized I had not counted my steps. I began to do so then, quietly, in my head. 1, 2, 3. I lost count almost immediately. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself that tired minds invent problems. Still, I did not stop walking. Eventually, the inn appeared. Or something that looked like one. A low building set back from the road, its windows glowing warmly against the gathering dark. Smoke rose from the chimney in a steady, welcoming line. A lantern hung by the door, already lit. Lit, too ready. I slowed instinctively. I did not remember passing this place before. I did not remember leaving it. I stood on the road for a long time, watching. The light did not flicker. The smoke did not shift. The door remained closed, as though waiting for me to decide. Every rule I had ever learned pressed gently against the back of my thoughts, and still, I was tired. This is the part people misunderstand when I tell them later. They think the road overpowered me. It did not. I chose. I told myself that one mistake did not have to lead to another. I told myself that the rules were meant to protect the careless, not the experienced. I told myself I would not sit. I would only ask. I stepped off the road. Just once. The ground beside it felt no different beneath my foot. Solid, real. I took another step, then another, moving slowly toward the door. With each step, the road behind me felt farther away. Not physically, conceptually, like something I had already passed. I stopped before reaching the door. I do not know why. Perhaps the quiet had grown to complete. Perhaps some part of me still remembered what I had taught others. I stood there, close enough to feel the warmth from the windows, close enough to smell food cooking inside. My stomach tightened painfully. No voice called out. No invitation came. The door remained closed. That is when I realized something that made my breath catch. I could not hear the road anymore. No wind, no distant movement, no sense of space behind me. Only the building, only the waiting. I stepped back. Once, then again. The ground resisted slightly, like wet earth clinging to a boot. I pulled free and stepped again, faster this time. The road returned beneath my feet with a familiar firmness. I did not look back. I walked for what felt like hours after that. The bells did not ring again. Nothing followed me. And yet, something had changed. Later, when I finally rested, not in an inn, but beneath open sky, I lay awake longer than usual. Not afraid, just aware. I replayed the moment again and again, examining it from every angle. I had broken only one rule, barely, and the road had noticed. I did not sleep easily, and when morning came, it felt thinner somehow, like a copy of itself. I rose, adjusted my pack, and returned to the road, because that is what you do. Even when you know better. Morning did not arrive all at once. It never really does, not on the road. It comes in layers. A thinning of darkness, a slight graying of the sky, the first suggestion of shape returning to the world. But that morning felt different in a way I could not name. Not darker, not brighter, just less certain. As though daylight itself had been delayed somewhere and was arriving late, apologetically, with its cloak still half-buttoned. I woke stiff with cold, my cloak damp at the edges where it had touched grass. I had slept beneath open sky, as I had done many times before, and for a few moments I lay still, listening, gathering myself. The wind moved, but it moved strangely, not in a single direction. It seemed to wander, touching the trees and then pulling away, as if deciding whether it wished to stay. Birdsong came late. I sat up and looked at the road. It was there, exactly where it should be, a pale strip of worn earth and stones, stretching north and south with the quiet confidence of something that has existed longer than anyone can remember. My pack lay beside me, my boots still on, my hands still mine. Everything looked correct, and yet I felt unmistakably that the road had taken note of me. You can feel it sometimes, not as a presence, not as a gaze, more like the sensation you get when you enter a room mid-conversation and the voices stop for half a beat. Not because you are important, but because you have changed the shape of the space. I had changed the shape of something by pausing for those bells, by stepping toward that inn, even though I had turned back, even though I had not crossed the threshold. The road does not measure you by what you complete. It measures you by what you were willing to begin. I rose slowly and began my preparations with the same care I always used, as though care could smooth out a mistake after the fact. I checked the straps of my pack. I ate what little bread I had left, chewing deliberately. I drank from my flask in small, sensible sips. Then I stepped onto the road and started walking. At first, it felt normal. The ground met my boots with a familiar firmness. The air was cold but clean. A faint mist clung to hollows and hedgerows, caught like wool on branches. I watched it drift and thin as the sun strengthened. I tried to let the unease settle. People make mistakes, I told myself. Even experienced travelers misjudge distance. Even careful men pause when they should not. The rules are not laws of nature, they are habits. They exist because the road is long and tiredness is common. I repeated this to myself until it almost sounded true. It was mid-morning when I noticed the first adjustment. A milestone stood beside the road. A stone marker half sunk into the earth, its surface worn smooth by weather and time. I had passed hundreds like it. Some bore faint carved letters, some only grooves where inscriptions had once been. This one was clean, too clean. The top edge looked newly chipped, as though struck recently. The face was pale, unweathered, like bone. I slowed to look at it. No letters, no numbers, just a shallow line cut across the stone, like the beginning of a mark that someone had stopped halfway through. I stared longer than I meant to. Then I walked on. Before midday, I reached a bend that should not have been there. The Great North Road, in that stretch, usually ran straighter, following a long rise before dipping toward a shallow stream. I remembered it clearly, because the stream was where I often refilled my flask. But the rise ended sooner than expected, and the road bent gently to the right, curving into a cluster of trees that I did not remember. I stopped walking for a moment, then forced myself to continue. The bend felt wrong beneath my feet. Not wrong like a sudden turn. Wrong like a word pronounced correctly but in the wrong voice. I looked for the stream. I did not see it. By midday, I should have known where I would sleep. That thought returned to me with a quiet sting, because it was the very thing I had ignored the day before. I tightened my grip on my pack strap and kept walking, determined not to repeat the same error. The sky was clearer now, the sun pale but steady. My pace was measured, my breathing even. I began to name landmarks in my head, anchoring myself. The hedge with the split trunk, the low wall of piled stones, the patch of nettles that always grew thick near the verge. But each time I expected one to appear, it appeared slightly wrong. The wall was shorter. The hedge leaned the other way. The nettles grew on the opposite side. Small things, the kind of things a tired mind might misremember. Except I was not that tired anymore. In the early afternoon, I heard footsteps behind me. They were faint at first, indistinguishable from the sound of my own boots. I might not have noticed them at all if the road had not been so quiet. I slowed. The footsteps slowed. I increased my pace slightly. The footsteps did the same, not catching up, not falling behind, matching me exactly. Rule for pressed forward in my mind, steady and clear. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn immediately. So I did not. I kept walking as though I had heard nothing, and I waited. If it was another traveler, he would call out. He would clear his throat. He would speak a greeting, or at least shuffle closer to announce his presence. No greeting came. Only the footsteps, calmly repeating mine. I felt a faint tightening in my chest. Not fear, not yet. More like the body's quiet recognition that something has shifted. I forced my shoulders to relax. I kept walking. After a long time, long enough that my legs began to ache, the footsteps changed. Not in pace, in texture. The sound of them grew softer, as though the ground beneath them had become different. And then, without any change in the space behind me, they stopped. Not faded, stopped. As cleanly as a door being closed. I did not turn. I continued walking until the road dipped and rose again, until the trees opened out, until the wind returned in a way that felt more ordinary. Only then did I allow myself a single glance back. There was no one. The road behind me was empty. That should have been enough to unsettle me for the rest of the day. But the road was not finished adjusting. Later, as the afternoon deepened, I came upon a small roadside shrine, a simple wooden frame with a carved cross, draped with a strip of cloth that had once been white. A few stones lay at its base, arranged neatly, as though placed with intention. These shrines were common. Travelers left offerings for luck, for safety, for the souls of the dead. What stopped me was the cloth. It was not weathered. It looked fresh, the edges still crisp, and stitched into it, in dark thread, was a symbol I did not recognize. A circle, broken at the top, a line descending through it, and beneath that, a small, careful mark, like a footprint. I stared at it for longer than I should have. And then, quietly, without thinking, I looked away. Rule 7 rose in my mind without being called. If the road becomes unnaturally straight, count your steps. I realized I had not counted since morning. I began again, quietly. 1, 2, 3, 4. My thoughts snagged on the symbol. I lost count at 12. I started again. By late afternoon, the road did something I could not deny. It straightened, not gradually, not in the gentle way roads sometimes do when they cross open land. It straightened as though someone had pulled it tight. The hedgerows aligned neatly on either side. The ruts of the road ran in clean lines. Even the stones seemed more evenly placed. It stretched ahead like a drawn string, disappearing into a slight haze in the distance. My mouth went dry. I began counting my steps again. 1, 2, 3, 4. The number settled into my mind like a rhythm. It calmed me. 5, 6, 7, 8. I focused on the count, on the steady rise and fall of my boots, on the gentle swing of my pack against my back. 9, 10, 11, 12. The haze ahead shifted. I told myself it was my eyes. 13, 14, 15. I did not look at the haze. 16, 17, 18. The air grew still. 19, 20. I felt, very suddenly, that if I stopped counting, something would happen. I kept counting. The bells rang. A single ring. Very faint. Wrong hour. Rule 8 spoke in my mind. When the bells ring at the wrong hour, keep walking. So I did. I did not look for the source. I did not pause. I did not listen for a second ring. I walked and counted. 21, 22, 23. The bell did not ring again, but the air remained still, as though waiting to see whether I would break again. As evening approached, the straightness loosened. The road began to bend again in its familiar way. The hedgerows grew uneven. Stones returned to their scattered, ordinary placement. My shoulders eased. Only then did I realize how tightly I had been holding myself. I stopped counting. The quiet did not change. But I did not feel relief. I felt watched. Not by something behind me, by the road itself. By the time I found an inn, a real one, recognizable, with the smell of smoke and damp wool and human life, I was exhausted in a way that felt older than the day. I stood outside the door for a long moment, listening to voices within, laughter, a cup placed on wood, a fire crackling, ordinary sounds. I entered. Warmth met my face. The innkeeper glanced up and asked my name. I gave it. The question felt like a lifeline. I sat near the hearth and ate slowly, letting my hands warm around the bowl. Around me, travelers spoke in low, tired voices. No one looked at me twice. No one warned me. No one mentioned bells. No one spoke of roads becoming too straight. Perhaps they had not noticed. Or perhaps they had noticed and chosen not to speak. That night, in my room, I lay on the thin mattress and listened to the unsettling footsteps on stairs. Murmurs fading, the building creaking in its joints like an old man. For a while, I almost believed the road had released me. Then, somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the inn's warmth, I heard it. My name, spoken softly from a place too far to see, not shouted, not called, just spoken, as though confirming something to itself. Rule 9 arrived too late, heavy and cold in my mind. Never answer if someone calls your name from the trees. I did not answer. I did not move. I lay as still as the dead and waited for morning. By morning, the voice was gone. Not faded, just gone, as though it had never existed at all. I woke slowly, my body heavy with the kind of tiredness that settles deep into your bones, not just your muscles. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to the in-breathe around me. Floorboards creaked as someone moved below. A door opened, then closed again. Somewhere, a pot was set down too hard. Ordinary sounds. They should have comforted me. Instead, a faint unease settled in, like the bitter aftertaste of a bad meal. I didn't mention the voice to anyone. There are things you just don't share on the road, not because people wouldn't believe you, but because belief has a nasty way of spreading problems. So, I paid for my food, tightened the straps on my pack, and stepped back onto the Great North Road as the morning mist began to thin. The road accepted me without a word. That, I was beginning to understand, was not reassurance. As I walked, I found myself thinking of other travelers. Not all at once, and not clearly. They surfaced the way old songs do, a phrase here, a face there. Half-remembered moments stitched together by time and repetition. People I'd met at firesides. Men and women who walked with me for a mile or two, then fell behind or turned away. Voices that had once spoken rules in low tones, as though repeating something they didn't fully understand themselves. I had never asked where most of them went. I was starting to suspect I already knew. There was a man I walked with near York, years ago. He was older than me, lean and quiet, with a scar along his jaw that pulled his mouth slightly out of shape when he spoke. He carried very little, no real pack, no visible weapon, yet he walked with the ease of someone who had survived many things. We shared the road for a morning, speaking only when necessary. At one point, as the trees pressed closer on either side, he slowed and said, without even looking at me, "If the birds stop singing all at once, don't ask why." I asked him why anyway. He stopped walking. He turned to look at me with something like disappointment. "Because asking means you're listening," he said, and that was all. We didn't speak again. At midday, he stepped off the road and took a narrow path I didn't recognize. It curved away into the trees, shallow at first, then steeper. I didn't follow. I never saw him again. Then there was a woman I met further south, traveling alone with a cart that carried more weight than she did. She had lost to oxen and learned to pull it herself. A thick rope looped around her shoulders. She knew every inn for miles and deliberately avoided half of them. "Never sleep where they know your name before you arrive," she told me one night, stirring a pot over our fire. I laughed then, thinking it was a joke. She didn't. When I asked her how she knew, she just tapped the side of her head and said, "Because I once arrived somewhere I was already expected." She left before dawn. The fire was still warm when I woke. Others were easier to forget. Men who talked too much. Travelers who were always in a rush. Those who dismissed the rules as just stories meant to frighten children. They are the ones who linger most in my memory now, because they don't linger anywhere else. The road teaches by subtraction. You start to notice who stops appearing at the inns, who fails to catch up after a day's walk, who never reaches the next town. At first, you tell yourself they must have taken a different route, that they turned back, that they found something better along the way. But eventually, you stop making excuses for the road. By mid-afternoon, I reached a crossroads where 4 roads met, each marked by a weathered post. I had passed it many times before. It was an easy place to rest, sheltered from the wind, with a wide, flat stone set just off the road that made a good seat. I stopped there now, lowering myself carefully onto the stone. Someone had carved markings into the post. Not letters, not symbols meant to be read. Just short, shallow lines, scratched in uneven groups. Tallies, I counted them without meaning to. There were far too many to be accidents. I remembered a boy I had once traveled with for half a day. He was young, eager, carrying important messages for someone powerful, so he believed himself protected by that status. He had reached a crossroads much like this one and joked that it felt like the road itself was deciding which way to send him. He had stepped off the Great North Road to relieve himself behind the post, laughing as he went. I had waited. He did not return. I waited longer than was sensible. Then I left. The road does not explain itself. As I resumed walking, the memories continued to surface, unbidden now. A merchant who swore he heard a voice he recognized calling from the woods, and insisted on following it. A pilgrim who found a rusted bell by the roadside and rang it, just to see if it still worked. A guard who boasted that he could always tell when he was being followed, that no one could ever sneak up on him. Each story ended the same way, with absence. This is why no one explains the rules properly. Explanation invites challenge. Challenge invites testing. And testing invites correction. The road corrects in ways that do not leave room for argument, so the rules are passed on quietly, casually, as habits rather than laws, as things you just do without ever asking why. It is not kindness that keeps the rules unspoken. It is containment. By evening, I found myself walking more slowly than necessary, not from fatigue, but from sheer attention. Every sound felt deliberate now, every shift of light in the trees, every pause between my own footsteps. I realized that the road was no longer just something I traveled upon. It was something that traveled through me. As dusk settled, I came upon a small fire beside the road, already lit. A man sat near it, his back to me, warming his hands. I stopped several paces away. He didn't turn. "Cold night," he said. His voice was calm. I agreed that it was. He gestured to the fire, inviting me closer. I did not move. We sat like that for a long time, the fire crackling softly in the silence between us. Finally, he spoke again, his voice low. "They don't tell you the rules until it's too late." I felt my stomach tighten into a knot. "Who doesn't?" I asked. "The road," he replied. Then he stood, stepped away from the fire, and simply walked into the dark without another word. I did not follow. The fire burned low, then died. There was no trace of him by morning. That night, I slept poorly again. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind was busy connecting things that had once seemed completely unrelated. The rules were not warnings. They were descriptions. Descriptions of how the road behaves. Descriptions of what it notices. Descriptions of what it collects. Near dawn, as the sky began to pale from black to grey, I had a thought that settled heavily in my chest. I had broken a rule. The road had adjusted. And now, it was no longer treating me as a stranger. I rose early and returned to walking, determined to be careful. More careful than I had ever been before. But as the road stretched ahead of me, familiar yet subtly changed, I could not shake the feeling that something had shifted permanently. That I was now part of a pattern I had only ever observed from the outside. The rules still applied, but they felt closer, as though they were no longer instructions for me to follow, as though they were expectations the road had of me. By the time the sun was fully up, I understood something I had never allowed myself to consider before. Some travelers do not disappear. Some remain. They walk. They warn. They pass on the rules without explaining them. And then, one day, they are no longer walking. Not because they are gone, but because the road has found a use for them. I tightened my grip on the straps of my pack and kept going, because stopping had never been an option, and because the road now knew exactly where I was. By the 5th day, I realized the mistake was not that I had broken a rule. The mistake was believing that following them again would put everything back the way it had been. People think rules are gates, that you step through them and become safe. But the Great North Road does not work like that. It is not a lock that can be refastened once opened. It is more like a surface of still water. Once you disturb it, it remembers the shape of the disturbance for a long time. I walked early, as I always had, before dawn had fully broken, while the world still felt soft around the edges. I left an inn behind me and stepped into quiet hedgerows, listening to the road in that careful way I had adopted since the bells. The sky was pale, the air cold. My breath rose and vanished. I should have felt reassured. Instead, I felt watched in the way you feel watched by something you cannot confront. Not a man, not an animal. Something that does not need to hide because it is not, truly, in danger of being found. I followed the first rule perfectly. I began before the day had decided itself. I followed the second rule too. By the time the sun climbed toward midday, I knew where I would sleep. I had asked the innkeeper the night before about the next settlement. I had counted the miles in my head. I had made sure my plan held. I even followed the third rule. No shortcuts, no unfamiliar paths, no tempting sidetracks. And still, the road felt wrong. Not hostile, not threatening, just different. As though it had shifted a fraction to the left and I was the only one who could sense it. It began with sound. A cart approached from behind me late in the morning. I heard the wheels first, the slow, rhythmic clatter of wood over stone, then the horse's breath, faint and steady. I moved to the side as any traveler would, giving space. The cart passed. The driver did not look at me. That is not unusual. People keep to themselves. But as the cart moved ahead, the sound did not fade the way it should have. It continued at the same volume, the same distance, as though it remained beside me even as it traveled away. I quickened my pace slightly. The cart's sound remained unchanged. I slowed, still unchanged. I stopped walking altogether and held my breath, listening. The sound stopped too, as cleanly as if it had been tied to my movement. A moment later, I began walking again. The cart resumed, not ahead of me, not behind me, simply there, keeping pace at a distance I could not measure. I did not turn to look. Rule 4. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn immediately. This wasn't footsteps, but it was the same kind of wrong. I kept walking until the air shifted and the sound finally faded, as though released. My hands were cold despite the steady pace. I told myself it was the morning chill. I told myself that tired minds exaggerate. I told myself many things. The road listened without comment. At midday, I reached the place I had planned to rest. A small rise beside a stream, half shaded by an alder tree. I knew this place. I had sat there in years past, eating bread and watching the water move over stones. The stream was there. The tree was there. The rise was there. But the stream did not sound right. It made the correct noise, certainly water moving, stones shifting beneath it, but the rhythm was wrong. The sound repeated itself in a loop that was just slightly too perfect, like a tune hummed by someone who only knows 3 notes. I sat anyway, because stopping was part of staying human. I ate, chewing slowly. The stream repeated its sound. Again, again, again. When I looked down into the water, the surface was clear, too clear. I could see the stones, the weeds, the small flickers of fish, and I could see my reflection, faintly, as one always can. Except my reflection did not move when I did. Not immediately. It delayed by the length of a single breath. I stared. I blinked. The reflection blinked after me. I looked away at once, heart steady but heavy. Rule 10 rose in my mind, uninvited. If you see another version of yourself ahead on the road, slow down. This was not ahead, but it was another version, and I had looked straight at it. I left the stream quickly, my appetite gone. I did not run. I did not hurry. I simply resumed walking with the controlled pace of someone who understands that panic is its own kind of mistake. Still, as I moved away, I felt the weight of my own attention, as though looking had cost me something small but important. By late afternoon, the bells rang, not faintly, not distantly, close enough that I could feel the sound in my ribs. One ring, then silence. The hour was wrong. Rule 8 said, keep walking. So I did. I forced myself to walk as though the bells were ordinary, as though they had rung for prayer and nothing more. The road ahead bent gently, the hedges thick, the light thinning. A normal stretch, a normal evening, except for the feeling that the bell had rung inside the space around me, not from any village or church, as though the road itself had found a way to make the sound. Near dusk, I saw smoke, a thin line rising above the hedgerow, steady and inviting. An inn, I thought, a hearth, a place to rest. I knew where I planned to sleep, and this was not it. Still, I slowed. The smoke was too perfect, straight, consistent, the color of clean burning wood. I walked closer until the hedge opened and the building revealed itself. It was an inn, or it looked like one, low and broad, with windows lit warmly. The door stood slightly open, as though someone had stepped inside and forgotten to close it behind them. I stopped on the road. Rule 11 pressed against my mind like a cold hand. Never arrive at an inn you do not remember leaving. I did not remember leaving this one. In fact, I did not remember seeing it at all, and yet the building looked familiar in the way dreams look familiar, as though it had borrowed parts of other places I had known. The same kind of wooden sign, the same shape of doorway, the same warm light. Even the smell reached me. Bread, stew, smoke. My stomach tightened painfully. I stood there and waited for my hunger to fade. From inside the inn, a voice spoke, not calling, not inviting, simply speaking, as if continuing a conversation. My name, softly, casually, like it belonged there. Rule 9 arrived immediately, sharp and heavy. Never answer if someone calls your name from the trees. This wasn't trees, but it was the same principle. They should not know my name. I had given it in the last inn. I had spoken it aloud. That had been normal. Names are normal. But the road was listening. And the road, I was beginning to understand, has ways of passing things along. I did not answer. I did not move. I let the moment stretch until it became unbearable. Then I took a step back. The door of the inn did not move, but the light in the window changed. It dimmed slightly, like a candle being pinched between fingers. I felt a pressure in my ears, the way you feel when descending into a valley too quickly. The road beneath my feet seemed to harden, becoming more real. I stepped back again. The pressure eased. I understood then that the inn was not simply a place. It was a question, and my answer had to be movement. I walked on. The sky darkened. The hedges grew thicker. The road dipped and rose. And still, behind me, I heard it. Not footsteps, not wheels. My own pace, repeated. As though something had begun to imitate the shape of my travel. I kept my eyes forward. Rule 4, Rule 7, Rule 8. I held them like beads in a prayer. When I finally reached the real settlement, the one I had planned for, it looked ordinary enough. A cluster of buildings, smoke rising unevenly, the sound of people within. The door of the inn was closed, as it should be. When I knocked, the innkeeper opened it with a suspicious glance, then softened when he saw my tired face. "What's your name?" he asked. I felt relief so strong it almost made my eyes sting. I gave it. The innkeeper nodded and stepped aside. Inside, the warmth was imperfect. The floorboards creaked. Someone laughed too loudly in the corner. A dog lay near the hearth, lifting its head to watch me. Everything was wrong in the way real things are wrong. I sat and ate slowly, and yet, even there, the rules did not settle. Because I could feel, under everything else, the faint sense of alignment, as though the road outside was still present, not as distance, but as connection, as though my mistake had threaded me to it. That night, lying in the dark, I tried to understand what had changed. I had followed every rule. I had done everything correctly. And still, the road had offered me the wrong inn. Still, it had spoken my name from a place it should not have known it. Still, it had repeated my pace, echoed my movement, mirrored the shape of my travel. The rules were not failing because they were false. They were failing because I was no longer simply a traveler. I had become noticed. Near midnight, I heard footsteps in the corridor outside my room. Slow, measured. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath. The footsteps did not move closer. They did not retreat. They remained there, as though waiting for something. I did not move. I did not speak. I waited. After a long time, the footsteps continued down the corridor and faded. Only then did I exhale. I lay awake until morning, listening to the inn settle and the night thin. When dawn came, it arrived more clearly than it had the day before, as though the world had finally decided to be itself again. I rose, packed my things, and stepped back onto the Great North Road. And as my boots met the earth, I felt it, that faint, unmistakable sense that the road had been waiting, not for a mistake, for a continuation. Because the road does not punish the careless, it collects the consistent. And I was still walking. There comes a point on the road when you stop asking whether you are safe. Not because you feel secure, but because the question no longer applies. I reached that point on a morning that looked perfectly ordinary. The sun rose cleanly, without hesitation. The sky was pale blue, the air crisp and still. Smoke lifted from chimneys in uneven threads, and the village I left behind woke slowly. It sounds familiar and reassuring. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something closer to resignation. The road lay ahead of me, unchanged in shape, but altered in meaning. I could feel it in the way my boots met the earth, in the way my breath matched the pace of my walking without effort. I no longer had to think about how to walk. My body knew, and that, I was beginning to understand, was part of the cost. I followed the rules carefully that day, not out of fear, but habit. I left early. I measured distance. I avoided shortcuts without questioning why. The rules moved through me like instinct now, no longer instructions but reflexes. This is how the road keeps you, by making itself part of you. I passed another traveler late in the morning, a young man, lightly packed, moving with the confidence of someone who still believed the road was something to be conquered. We exchanged nods as we passed. He hesitated, then spoke. "You walk like you've been here before," he said. I considered the words. "I have," I replied. "How far does it go?" he asked, gesturing ahead. "The Great North Road stretches farther than any single answer can cover." "It depends how you walk it," I said instead. He frowned, unsatisfied, then shrugged and continued on his way. I watched him until he rounded a bend and disappeared from sight. I did not warn him. I understood now why no one had warned me. The road does not need many. It needs a few who continue. By midday, I stopped near a familiar stream, not the one from before, but another, older in its sound, less eager to repeat itself. I sat on a stone and ate slowly, watching the water move with the patience of something that knows it will outlast me. For the first time in days, my reflection behaved correctly. It moved when I moved. It looked back when I looked down. And yet, the comfort that should have brought did not arrive, because I knew now that correctness was not protection. It was alignment. I began to think of the road not as a path, but as a system. It connects places, certainly villages, towns, inns, crossings, but more than that, it connects people. Not socially, functionally. It moves information, it moves habits, it moves warnings, and sometimes it moves responsibility. That afternoon, I came upon a stretch where the road widened slightly, enough for carts to pass comfortably. At its edge stood a weathered post, leaning but unbroken. Someone had tied strips of cloth to it. Not offerings, markers. Each strip was different, some faded, some fresh, some torn, but all were tied with care. I counted them without meaning to. 7. I felt a familiar weight settle in my chest. I did not add one. As the day wore on, I noticed something else. The road no longer tested me. No bells rang at the wrong hour. No footsteps echoed behind me. No voices spoke my name. It was calm, to calm, like the silence after a decision has been made. By evening, I reached an inn that I recognized, not because I remembered leaving it, but because I remembered passing it many times before without stopping. It sat slightly off the road, modest and unremarkable. This time, I stopped. Inside, the innkeeper looked up and smiled faintly. "Long walk?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded, as though that explained everything. No further questions, no unease, no curiosity. I realized then that people see what they expect to see, and the road, now, had made me expected. That night, as I lay in my room, I listened to the inn settle. Voices faded. Footsteps slowed. The fire died down. Outside, the road remained, not as sound, as presence. I felt it the way you feel the nearness of someone standing just beyond a door, not intruding, not leaving, waiting. I understood then that the road does not take people suddenly. It takes them gradually, by narrowing their choices, by teaching them its rhythms, by making the rules feel like common sense. Eventually, continuing feels easier than stopping, and stopping feels irresponsible. I thought of the travelers I had known, the man with the scar, the woman with the cart, the boy at the crossroads. They had not vanished. They had been reassigned, folded into the long process of keeping the road intact, warning others, leaving marks, passing on rules without explanation, walking until walking was no longer a choice. Sleep came slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I was considering something carefully. I had followed the rules. I had survived the adjustments. I had learned what the road expected. The question now was not whether I could continue. It was whether I should. Morning arrived cleanly again. The air was cool, the sky pale. I rose, packed my things, and stood in the doorway of the inn for a long moment, looking out at the great north road stretching away from me. It did not pull. It did not beckon. It simply waited, as it always does. There are two ways to leave the road. One is to step away from it. The other is to stop being the kind of person who belongs on it. I understood then that the first way was no longer available to me. I had walked too long, listened too closely, adjusted too well. The road had shaped me into something useful. I stepped outside and stood on the road without moving. For the first time since I began walking, I did not immediately continue. I stood and breathed and let the silence gather. The road did not react. It did not need to. It already knew I would decide. I do not remember exactly when I chose. There was no single thought, no clear moment of resolve. Only the quiet understanding that the road had already taken something from me, and that stopping now would mean wasting it. So I walked. Not because I wanted to, but because continuing felt like the last honest thing left. As my boots found their rhythm again, I felt the road settle around me, comfortable and familiar. I was no longer merely protected by the rules. I was part of the reason they existed, and that, I understood, was the true cost. The last rule is not a rule you learn at a fire. No one leans toward you in an inn and whispers it with a serious face. No old traveler taps his cup and says, "Listen carefully now," as though the words alone might keep you safe. The last rule is not passed from mouth to mouth. It is passed from road to traveler, quietly, over time. until one day you realize you have been obeying it for years without knowing it had a name. I walked north that morning with a steady pace and a calm that was not entirely my own. The weather was mild, the sky a soft grey that promised nothing dramatic. The hedgerows were heavy with late-season damp, their leaves dark and glossy. The road held its shape, curving where it ought to curve, rising where it should rise. Everything, finally, behaved. No bells rang at strange hours. No footsteps matched mine. No voice spoke my name from places it should not have known it. It should have felt like an improvement. Instead, it felt like a settling, like the road had finished correcting me. At midday I passed a crossroads, a familiar one. I recognized the shape of the land, the gentle rise, the shallow ditch at the side. The old post stood there, leaning slightly, carved with markings too faint to read from a distance. The same stone lay near it, good for resting. The same wind moved through the grass, low and cautious. I stopped, not because I needed rest, because I needed to see. I walked to the post and ran my fingers over the tallies carved into the wood. They were deeper than I remembered, more numerous. I did not count them. I did not need to. I knew what they meant. You start out thinking the road is a thing you use, a path, a convenience, a line between places. Then you learn it is a thing that uses you back, not cruelly, not with malice, simply with purpose. The Great North Road does not want everyone. It wants a few who pay attention, a few who keep walking, a few who learn, and then pass the learning onward. It takes them the way a river takes stones, gradually smoothing their edges until they fit where they are placed. I sat on the stone beside the post and ate a small portion of bread. The air was still, the light thin, the silence comfortable, and in that quiet, I remembered the boy, the one who stepped off the road behind this very post and did not return. I had told myself many things about that day over the years, that he wandered, that he slipped, that he chose a different route, anything that made absence feel accidental. But sitting there now, I understood what had really happened. He had stepped away at the wrong moment, and the road had accepted the offering without remark, because it was offered. I sat longer than I meant to. I watched a cloud move slowly across the sky. I listened to the grass shift in the faint wind. I waited for the road to do something. It did not. It did not need to. When I stood and shouldered my pack again, I realized something with a mild surprise. I did not feel fear, not even the quiet kind. I felt responsibility, and that was far worse, because responsibility does not allow you to pretend the danger is someone else's problem. I walked on. The afternoon passed without event. The road remained ordinary, as if to show me it was capable of it. I passed a cart going the other way and exchanged nods with the driver. I passed a small group of travelers and stepped aside so they could walk together without squeezing past me. They looked tired, new to the road. One of them glanced at me and then quickly away, as though he had sensed something and did not want to confirm it. I recognized the expression. I had worn it myself once. Near dusk, I reached a stretch of road bordered by trees, tall, close-set, their branches interlacing overhead. The light beneath them was darker than the sky should have allowed, and the air felt cooler, as though trapped. I slowed slightly, not because I was afraid, because this was a place where people made mistakes. I listened. Nothing. No bells, no footsteps, only my own boots on the road. I walked through the trees and watched the dimness lift as the branches thinned. When I emerged, I felt the world open again, as if I had passed through something that could have closed. At the next inn, the innkeeper asked my name. I gave it without hesitation. Then I paused, the way a person pauses when they notice themselves doing something automatically. Once, names had anchored me. Now I suspected they were also how the road kept track. Still, the innkeeper nodded and offered me a seat near the hearth. Everything was ordinary, imperfect, real. I ate slowly and listened to the low murmur of other travelers. A man complained of sore feet. A woman spoke of rain further south. Someone laughed softly at a joke that was not very funny. Ordinary things. I let them wash over me. Later, in the dim of my room, I lay awake and thought of the rules again. Rule 1. Start early. Rule 2. Know where you'll sleep. Rule 3. Avoid shortcuts. Rule 4. Do not turn too quickly. Rule 5. Exchange names before food. Rule 6. Do not stop in the wrong village. Rule 7. Count your steps. Rule 8. Ignore the wrong bells. Rule 9. Do not answer your name. Rule 10. Slow down if you see yourself. Rule 11. Do not accept the welcoming inn. Rule 12. Wait for morning if the road ends. All of them useful, all of them true, in their way. But none of them were the final rule. The final rule was the one no one had ever told me directly, and yet it had been guiding me for years. It was the rule that explained why travelers warned each other in half sentences and then stopped. Why they passed on habits without meaning. Why the road never needed to chase. Because the road does not need you to break rules. It only needs you to keep walking. And once you keep walking long enough, you begin to belong to it. The final rule is this. If you learn the rules, you must pass them on. Not loudly, not clearly, not in a way that invites argument. You pass them on the way the road passes them on to you, through small warnings, quiet habits, a sentence spoken at the right moment to the right person. Because if you do not, the road will correct the balance. It will take what it needs, and it will take it from someone less prepared. I understood then why no one ever explained the rules properly. Explaining is mercy, and mercy makes people careless. If you explain too much, people feel safe enough to test, so you offer fragments, just enough to keep them on the road, just enough to keep them walking. Near dawn, I heard a sound outside the inn. Footsteps, measured, slow. They stopped beneath my window. I held my breath. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the footsteps continued, moving on down the road, fading into distance as if the night itself had picked them up and carried them away. I realized something quietly, with no surprise at all. They weren't looking for me anymore. They were simply checking, confirming that I still belonged to the pattern. Morning arrived. I rose, packed, and stepped out into the pale light. The air was cold, clean, and calm. The road waited, stretching north and south, patient and unbroken. As I began walking, I saw someone ahead of me, a traveler, moving slowly, his pack too large, his posture uncertain. He stopped and turned slightly, glancing back as if he had heard something behind him. He was about to turn fully, about to make the mistake that comes from curiosity and fatigue. I increased my pace just enough to close the distance. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to arrive as a presence at his shoulder. He looked at me, startled. I gave him a small nod, as though we were simply two men sharing the same stretch of road. "Don't turn too fast," I said quietly. He blinked. "What?" he asked. I did not explain. He frowned as if about to laugh, then hesitated. Something in my tone, or in the way the road held the silence around us, made him swallow his reply. He nodded once, uncertainly, and continued walking. I let a few paces open between us again. I did not speak further. I did not offer him reasons, or stories, or a name for what might follow him. That was not my role. My role was to pass the rule onward, quietly, without inviting challenge. As the sun climbed higher, the road warmed slightly beneath my feet. Birds began to sing, soft and scattered. The wind moved more naturally through the hedgerows. The world felt ordinary again. Not because it was safe, because the system was in balance. And as I walked, I found myself thinking back to the beginning, to the first 3 rules, the ones everyone knows, the ones people share freely, laughing, believing the road is only distance and weather. I understood now why the first 3 rules are always the first, because they are the easy ones, because they keep you walking long enough to learn the others. The Great North Road stretched ahead, patient, familiar, endless, and I walked it as I always had, not as a man trying to reach a destination, but as someone keeping the road's old knowledge moving forward, one quiet sentence at a time. If you travel the Great North Road, remember this. The first 3 rules are the ones you already know. It's the rules that come after that cause problems. The ones no one explains properly. The ones you only learn because someone else didn't follow them. And if you are lucky, someone will be there at the right moment to tell you one of them. Not enough to make you safe, just enough to keep you walking.